our fifth and final conference preview, we will be bringing you the SEC. Evan, are there key players that you want to talk about in this conference?
Yeah, so three key players. And when I think of key players, especially with the SEC, you got the heavy favorites. So I think it's important to focus on the players that are heavy favorites. I know there's lots of talents. I know Jake's buddy Garcia's quarterback in Missouri now. And, we have some other fun talent around the conference. I know Graham Mertz, who is quarterback of Wisconsin, is now in Florida. But in my mind, no offense, those aren't key players. I mean, they're interesting players, but they're not key. So the three key players I think we have is we'll start with quarterback. I have one quarterback. We got Joe Milton of Tennessee. That's going to be huge. Can he pick up where Hendon Hooker left off? Hendon Hooker did great. We'll see how he does in the pros, but in the end, he did. They were able to beat Alabama, which was one of Tennessee's biggest wins in probably the last 10, 15 years. But unfortunately, he did get hurt, and, so as such. But can Joe Milton pick up where he left off? Tennessee is supposed to be widely talented. I think they're ranked top 10 right now. I know the AP rankings just came out, but I don't know that one for sure. Jordan, do you know that one?
We're Tennessee. I believe they're 12, 11,
Oh,
maybe?
12. Okay. Maybe looking quite on the outside, but still 12 is pretty impressive. And then two more players. I got J.C. Latham, who is a tackle for Alabama. Alabama has three quarterbacks. They're going to have to protect them. Obviously, this has never really been a problem under the Saban Alabama, but it's still important. Nonetheless, he's going to have to hold up for his young quarterbacks. And then I will say we got Mason Taylor for LSU. He is a tight end. LSU, if they're going to make it, they're going to have to do it offensively, kind of like what they did in 2019 with Joe Burrow. If they're going to compete with Alabama and if they're going to beat Alabama, they got to go to Alabama. You're going to have to put up some points. And that's an interesting weapon to, potentially score some points. So those would be my three players I'm watching the most in the SEC this year.
All right, Jake, you got any that you want to talk
Yeah,
about?
Mason Taylor is obviously a huge name to look out for on um LSU's offense. Also who's throwing him the football? Jaden Daniels. He's probably a player to watch out for on LSU too. Though, as we have seen in every one of these conference previews that we have done, you cannot talk about any of these conferences without mentioning quarterbacks. Joe Milton for Tennessee, Ty Simpson for Alabama, Carson Beck for Georgia, Jake Garcia for Missouri, Devin Leary coming over to Kentucky. So, especially the quarterbacks to look out for.
All right. I am surprised that neither of you mentioned the tight end for Georgia. Brock Bowers, who might be the best player in the country, honestly. And that might sound a little biased from me coming as a Georgia fan, but I honestly believe that. And then for Alabama starting quarterback, look, Jake mentioned the fact, or I think it was Evan actually that mentioned the fact that Alabama's got three quarterbacks. So they're thinking, so they're debating whether to kind of turn the clock back, to just run the ball, like when they had Derrick Henry, Trent Richardson, Najee Harris, But the main question is, can they do that? I don't know if they can, but we know that Alabama defense is going to be good. It always has under Saban. Evan, do you agree with that statement?
Oh, for sure. And I actually do think their defense has gotten a little weaker just because they focus on offense a little more. I mean, when you used to think about the SEC and Alabama, you used to think about hardcore defense. Now, they still play good defense, but the offense, especially what Jordan was talking about, the running game, in the last 10 years or so has really taken over. But in terms of getting like way blown out in games, like again, I know what Joe Burrow did to Alabama back in 2019. That was a rarity. In terms of like, there'll always be a pretty decent defense. Yeah.
All right. So, Evan, are there any key games that you would like to talk about in this conference?
Yeah, so I got four. These ones are more obvious than the ones that I've picked in the past, but still interesting. I think you got to look at Georgia and Tennessee. That's the 11th at Tennessee. That's the 11th game, second to last game of the season. That's going to be very important. I think Georgia should still fare decently in that, but it's a big game nevertheless. You got to give respect to Tennessee. They did beat Alabama on their home field last year, so you got to give that respect. I think you look at MTSU at Alabama. Just kidding. I went to school at MTSU for 2 years, so I'm a little biased, but no, that's not a game. You look at the other team, Tennessee, once again going to Alabama. That is the 8th game. Little, beginning of November, maybe late October. I don't remember exactly. That's going to be, a rematch from last year. Can Alabama stop Tennessee on their home field? They should be pretty even in terms of talent. Alabama, again, everyone's saying is a little down on talent this year, but yet they're still the second best odds to win it all. That's just the Saban factor. But can Tennessee really stick it to them? Again, that's another game I have. LSU at Alabama is the following week after that. Alabama's got to defend their home field twice. That's supposed to be, people think LSU will probably be a little more of a challenge than Tennessee. But again, we don't know, can LSU get a statement win just like in 2019? And then lastly, this is not going to affect, neither of these teams are going to be Georgia, but maybe they'll get close. Maybe they'll challenge them a little bit, push them to do a little better. You got Kentucky at South Carolina, which I think is an interesting game in the second to last game of the season. Again, none of them are going to challenge Georgia, but I think, especially two teams, South Carolina made some strides at the end of last year, and Kentucky has been solid, especially with their quarterbacks. We'll see if they're hanging around at the end of 2023.
All right, Jake. What are the key games that you believe are going to save this conference?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple games that Evan didn't bring up that I would like to bring up. The annual Georgia-Florida game in Jacksonville, that game is always, the one game always, helps decide the SEC. South Carolina and Georgia, that's the game of the season. I don't think South Carolina is going to win that one, but South Carolina, might give Georgia a good game. And then the final game I got is South Carolina and Tennessee. We were talking about South Carolina making strides at the end of last year. Evan was just talking about that. Can South Carolina give Tennessee a game? Because Tennessee is also expected to make a lot of strides this year. Can Joe Milton, like Evan mentioned, Joe Milton take off while Henry Hooker left?
All right. So the first game that I want to talk about is that Georgia-Auburn game on September 30th. That will be the first road start for, I'm guessing the Georgia quarterback will be Carson Beck this year, right? That will be his first career road start after 4 games at home against Georgia.
We picked Brock Vandergriff.
I believe it's going to be Carson Beck. But so that will be Carson's first road start after 4 home games to start the season for Georgia. And if you know that Auburn crowd like I do, they will be into it. This is a huge rivalry game. It's actually the Deep South oldest rivalry, the second most played rivalry in college football. So that will be a huge game. Alabama, Texas A&M the next week. We've seen Alabama, quote unquote, struggle again with Texas A&M the past couple years. This one's in College Station, and if Alabama's not certain about their quarterback and the offensive philosophy they want, this could be a very dangerous game, especially if Texas A&M gets the success that they're looking for under their new offensive coordinator, Bobby Petrino, right? I would definitely circle that game on my calendar. And then the final game that I want to talk about is Ole Miss, Georgia. I don't think Ole Miss will win this game, but the reason I want to bring this game up is because that is the week before Georgia goes and plays Tennessee in a game that will likely decide the SEC East. I know Evan mentioned South Carolina and Kentucky. Those two teams might push Georgia, give them a little run for their money, or Tennessee for that matter. But I don't think that they will win the East. All right, guys. It is time for conference championship picks. Who will win the SEC this year? Evan, I will start with you.
Okay, first off, because I didn't want to interrupt you, Brock Vandergriff, we did predict was going to win it in a video win the quarterback competition way back in February. Some guy in our comments told us we were wrong. It was going to be Carson Beck. So I just want to say congratulations to you. You were right. You got a beer. I could buy you a beer, or if that's not for you, I could buy you a soda. But anyways, hit me up. But so I think in the conference, this is going to be pretty boring, I think it's going to be, but it's going to surprise you a little bit. I think Alabama will finally get the edge over Georgia. that they've been looking for the last 2 years or so. They will beat Georgia in this championship. I know they did it 2 years ago, and then in the playoffs weren't so lucky, and then Georgia. But I think they'll get the edge this time. I don't know why. Georgia is still the best team in the country, but it's college football, baby, and I think it gets a little mixed up. And probably both will still go to the playoff. But give me Alabama over Georgia.
Nick, who is your SEC champion?
Give me, you know, and this is a little bit surprising. Give me Tennessee over Alabama in the SEC. You know, we all talk
You're
about
wearing the
Tennessee.
shirt. No,
I know. I'm wearing the shirt. I'm wearing the shirt. I know.
No respect.
Give me Tennessee over Alabama. I think Tennessee is gonna take a big leap. You know, Joe Milton's gonna take a big leap, leaving, taking off where Henry Hooker left off, and I think, you know, Tennessee is gonna go undefeated this year. They're gonna beat Georgia, and I think they'll win the SEC.
All right. I am a little surprised that I am the only one taking Georgia to repeat as SEC champions. I think clearly Georgia's the best team in the SEC, right? Well, I don't think clearly, but we all think that, right? Would we all agree with that statement?
I think they are probably the most talented team, but we'll see if that leads to another championship.
Okay. I have Georgia over LSU in the SEC championship game. I know, same matchup as last year, but I think LSU improved under year 2 under Brian Kelly. Do they make the playoff? I don't know if they do. In Georgia, we've just seen how much talent they have. So give me the Dogs over the Tigers in Atlanta. All right. So there are quite a few betting numbers that I would like to discuss, and I'm sure that I have some of the same as Evan and Jake. Let's start with Alabama. Over under 10.5 wins. Evan, what are you thinking?
I actually saw this one at 10, but we'll go with 10.5 because, Alabama, you would think they would get over, but their schedule's a little tough. They got Texas, they got Tennessee, they got LSU. Their schedule's a little tough. I'm still going to say over, though, but I'm not super confident about that one. We'll say over.
Dick, what do you have to say about the Tide?
Yeah, I like the Crimson Tide. I, however, think they're gonna go under in this one. I think that, some games that weren't mentioned on there, they're gonna lose to Tennessee. They're obviously gonna lose. They're gonna lose to Tennessee. They'll lose to Auburn. So I think there's your wings right there. They go under 10.5.
All right. First off, let me just mention. Wow, we got an upset pick already from Jake. Auburn over Alabama. I am going to take the Tide. I'm actually going to take the Tide under 10.5. So I mentioned that I had LSU winning the SEC West. So obviously I think that they'll beat Bama. But I also do think that Alabama loses to Texas early on in the season. So give me Alabama under 10.5. Georgia 11.5. Evan, what do you have to say about this?
So this was one of the two that I personally picked, and this is one of the two I felt strongest. I think, I just said Georgia's not going to win the SEC, but I think over 11.5 is a strong pick for Georgia. Their biggest competition, I was talking a little bit with Jordan and Jake about this before, is that game against Auburn that Jordan brought up. They should win that game, but that is at Auburn. It's a hostile environment. Sometimes you never know, but they should handily win that game. And then Georgia at Tennessee, which again is going to be a challenge, but I think Georgia 2023 is better than Alabama 2022. They will get the job done. So those are the two only challenges I could kind of see on their schedule. No, Ball State. Yeah, Ball State's going to challenge Georgia. I'm just kidding. But we'll have to get my friend Tyler on that. He goes to Ball State. But I think, I think that's a strong bet to say they're going to go undefeated in the regular season. Give me Georgia over 11.5.
Dick, over under 11.5 wins for Georgia.
First of all, I just wanted to bring up, me and Jordan will actually be at that Ball State game. Then I want to say, Georgia over under 11.5 wins, saying they're going to go undefeated in the regular season. I just said they're going to lose to Tennessee, so I'm going to actually take Georgia under.
All right. This might sound a little biased since I'm a Georgia fan, but I'm going to pick Georgia to go 12-0. So I'm going to go over with that. Evan did mention that the biggest competition seems to be Tennessee. But also you got to look at the Auburn game, which Georgia may lose. We may lose to Ole Miss because of the look-ahead factor, right? The week before we play Tennessee. And then obviously you've got the Georgia-Tennessee game, which will be a challenge. It all depends on what Joe Milton does and the replacement of Hendon Hooker, like Evan mentioned. But I like the dogs to go over 11.5. Before I continue, Evan, are there any over-unders you would like to discuss?
Yeah, so I gave my over. I have one more lock under I feel pretty confident about. I got Missouri under 6. I saw them flat at 6. And I think Missouri, the SEC is really strong again this year. Only maybe Mississippi State and Missouri on the west side are a little weaker. I don't think Missouri is going to get bowl eligible this year. MTSU and South Dakota, their first 2 games, they should be wins. But again, MTSU actually beat them a few years ago, so you can't count on that for sure. And then I think you got 4 for sure losses for Georgia. They're going to lose, or not for Missouri. They're going to lose to Georgia. They're going to lose to Tennessee. They're going to lose to LSU, and they're going to lose to Kansas State. So I think you got 4 losses right off the bat there. So in the other 6 games, they have to go in at least 4-2. They're all teams on their level. Florida, Arkansas. Are they going to go 4-2 over that span? No. Give me the under on Missouri. Sorry, Jake. I know you like Jake Garcia, but maybe you can have a good statistical year.
Oh, yeah. I hope so. I'm going to go Missouri over 6 wins. Just barely. I think they're going to go over 6 wins.
All right. So when it comes to Missouri, I know that obviously Jake Garcia came over from Miami, right? But they did also lose their best wide receiver from last year in the transfer portal to Georgia, actually, Dominic Lovett. But Missouri 6 wins, I believe they will actually go 6-6. So I don't have an over or an under for that pick. Jake, are there any over-unders that you want to discuss really quick?
Yeah, there's there's a couple over-unders that I would like to discuss. First of all, we got Tennessee over-under 9 wins straight. Like I said earlier, Tennessee's my pick to win the SEC. They're gonna go over. I think they're gonna go over easily. Evan, what you got, man?
What was Tennessee's line?
9 wins.
Yeah, I'll go maybe right on. I think I'm gonna go like Jordan said from Missouri. I'm gonna go right on 9 wins. I think they have a pretty difficult schedule. I didn't actually look at Tennessee's too much. Obviously they're gonna face Georgia and they're gonna face, but I'll go right on 9 wins. Yeah.
All right. So with Tennessee, it's 9. We know they play Georgia. We know they play Alabama. They don't play LSU this year out of the West. I believe the other game they get is Texas A&M, and for that game, that will be interesting to see what, like I mentioned, the offensive success that Texas A&M may have under new offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino, right? Are they rolling, or are they having another offensive kind of year like last year where they couldn't get out of the mud? I'm sorry if I offended any Aggie fans out there, but so for Tennessee, I'm going to go with even 9. So the thing is, every college football team loses a game that they're not supposed to every year. And for Tennessee, I can't pinpoint that loss, but I feel like they're going 9-3. I don't know what it is, but I just feel like they're going 9-3.
The other over-under I wanted to go over was an over-under that is a little difficult to predict. Vanderbilt over-under 3.5 wins. So I will go first, and I'll throw to Evan and then Jordan. I'm gonna go over 3.5 wins. I don't think Vanderbilt will challenge anyone for the SEC. I think they will get a little bit better though. So I'm gonna pick them over 3.5 wins.
Yeah, I'll go with Jake. I'm going to pick maybe a slight over 3.5. Again, I didn't really look in depth at their schedule. I know they open versus Hawaii, so that should be a win. So that's already on a step to 3.5 wins. I think they're kind of in no man's land. They're not a horrible team, but they're in such a the SEC is so tough that it's going to be tough to win conference games. But give me a slight over. Yeah, Vanderbilt over 3.5.
Give me Vanderbilt over 3.5 as well. They actually open up with Hawaii, and then they play Alabama A&M the next week. They travel to Wake Forest, and then they play UNLV. Um, so we're looking at a possible 3-1 in the non-conference, right? Where just to hit the over, you had to win one conference game. Now, will that be Missouri? Will that be Florida again? We just don't know, but I have a feeling that they're going to pick up at least one SEC win this year. So give me the Commodores over 3.5.